If you're trying to decide if you want to sell or rent your current home, well then this video is for you. Hey, how's it going everybody? It's Justin Artist checking in again, and today I want to talk about the factors to consider if you're thinking of selling or renting your current home. If you're leaning more towards selling, just make sure you factor in closing costs. So that's going to be around 8 to 9% of the value of the home, and for the average home around $400,000, that's anywhere from $32,000 to $36,000 that you'll pay to the listing agent, the buyer's agent, and then the attorneys and everything that go into helping you close the home. So make sure you factor that in. The second thing to consider is going to be the rent value in your neighborhood and what your cash flow will be. So you're going to look around for houses that have rented nearby and see what they're renting for, compare your house to those and see what you think you can rent for, and then subtract all your expenses. Again, this is going to be your principal, interest, taxes, insurance. It's also going to be any property manager's fee if you have one, and then a capital expenditures that I recommend you account for so you can be saving money for any random expenses that you have or any random renovations that you have to do for the home. So now that you know what you can walk away with if you sell, and also what your house will cash flow for, you can consider 3 things to determine what is the better option, renting or selling. So those 3 things are going to be your return on investment, your return on equity, and then the opportunity cost of the money that you would have if you sold. So your return on investment is going to be your yearly cash flow. So you take your cash flow and multiply by 11.5 is what I recommend, so you can count for any vacancy periods as you turn over tenants, and then divide that by the amount of money that you put into the home. So that's going to be your closing costs and any down payment that you put down. So if you multiply that by 100, that'll leave you with a percentage, and you want to see that around at least 9 to 10% at a minimum, so that you could beat what you could do in the stock market on average. So your return on equity is going to be a similar equation. So you're going to take 11.5 times your monthly cash flow, again to account for vacancies, and then divide that by the equity that you have in your home. So that's going to be the current market value of your home minus your remaining balance on your mortgage. So again, if you bought back before 2019, this should be a pretty large value. So both of these numbers are telling you how hard your money is working for you. Return on investment is telling you exactly the return you're getting on the money that you actually put into the home from your pocket. And then return on equity is telling you the same thing, just also accounting for the appreciation of your home over time. So you essentially want to take these 2 numbers and compare it to the opportunity cost. You have to think, what would you do with the money that you had if you sold the home? If you put it in the stock market, or put it in your savings account, or put it in some kind of mutual fund or whatever it is, what would the return on that money be in that situation, or versus what is the return that you're getting with the money invested in your home? You can also consider rent growth and further appreciation in your market. If you're in a desirable location and you expect the values of your home to go up, so that's going to create money for you. And then also the current economic situation of the stock market in general. What are your expectations of what's going to happen with that? So I'll let you decide those type of things, but those are the factors that you want to consider. So if you do end up deciding that you want to rent the home, there's 3 things that I'd recommend that you look into. The first is your insurance policy. So you currently have a homeowner's insurance policy, which means that you are the homeowner and you're living in that home. So the insurance company writes the premium based off of that. But when you go to rent that home, now you have someone else living in the home and it's not yourself. So if they were to go and damage your property, you might not get the claim if you go to the insurance company and then they figure out that there's a tenant in there, because that's not the right type of insurance. So essentially you just want to look into a landlord policy, and typically baked into that is a liability coverage anyway. So then that helps you in terms of liability, and then also it protects the home, the dwelling, if something happens to it from the tenants doing it. The second thing is you want to consider putting the home into an LLC so you can have liability protection, so that it's not in your name. So if it's in your name and somebody comes after you, they could potentially access the equity that you have in your home easily. But if you put it into an LLC, they have a harder time doing it. Final thing that I would recommend you look into is the difference in property tax rate from having a primary home and a secondary home. I can only speak for here in South Carolina, but we have the 4% and the 6% tax rate, and essentially the 4% tax rate is X amount of dollars, but if you go to the 6% tax rate, that goes up by 3x. So I had a home that we lived in and property tax was like $2,000, But then whenever we moved into a different home and then started renting that one, the property taxes went up to $6,000. So that severely cut into the cash flow. Luckily, we still making a great return off that home, but that is certainly a factor you want to consider, because that could drastically reduce the amount of cash flow that you're getting, which could then drastically reduce your return on investment and return on equity. So a couple other things to consider are capital gains and depreciation recapture. Capital gains taxes are the taxes that you pay on the net profit on the sale of your home. There's one instance in which you don't have to pay capital gains, which is if you have lived in the home for 2 of the past 5 years. But if you do not meet that requirement, then you will end up having to pay capital gains. So this is huge for if you are thinking of renting, and then say you have lived in the home for 2 years and then you rent for greater than 3 years. Well, now you don't meet that 2 of the past 5 year requirement. So when you do sell, you have to pay capital gains. So maybe selling sooner so you can avoid the capital gains might be something that you want to do. So make sure you factor that in. And then also, if you have not lived in your home for 2 years, if you sell it, you're going to have to pay capital gains tax. So there's 2 different rates. Again, if you have lived in the home for less than 1 year, then you're going to pay the taxes on the net profit at your normal tax bracket rate, which is typically around 22% for the average household. And then if you have lived in the home for greater than 1 year but less than 2 years, you're going to pay at the 15% tax rate. So the second tax that you can be on the hook for is depreciation recapture. So this will occur once you actually rent the home and now it's a secondary home. So as soon as you do that, your tax advisor is going to start depreciating the value of the home to offset the income from the home. And because of that, you're going to be able to reduce the amount of taxes that you're paying on that rental income. But then if you go to sell the home later, you then have to pay back the taxes that you would have paid on all the income that you use depreciation to offset when you sell the home. So, if you're depreciating that home over 10, 15 years, you can rack up a large tax bill that you're going to have to end up paying. And that's called depreciation recapture when you do sell the home. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but even if you think, well, I just won't depreciate the home so I don't have to pay back the depreciation recapture whenever I do sell 10, 15 years from now, well, the IRS assumes that you do, so you're going to have to pay that taxes regardless. So still depreciate your home if you go to rent, but just know that you're going to have to pay that depreciation recapture if you do sell. So there is a way to get out of the capital gains and the depreciation recapture by doing a 1031 exchange, but that is more if you're going to continue to invest in more real estate, and then you're going to hold that long term. But if you're not looking to do that and you just want to sell and get the money from the sale, then you're going to have to pay the capital gains and the depreciation recapture. All right, guys, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. I was just trying to give you some factors to consider if you're looking at selling or renting your current home. So again, just to recap, you want to consider what would be your net proceeds if you sold, taking into account your closing cost, and then the capital gains and depreciation recapture, which you may have to pay depending on when you're selling, and then comparing the opportunity cost of that money to your return on investment and return on equity of your current home if you were to then rent it. And then once you do that, you can make a numbers-based decision on what the best scenario for you would be. And then don't forget to consider those 3 things with renting, which are the landlord insurance policy, the 4 and 6% tax rate, and then transferring that home to an LLC for your liability protection. So with that, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That really does help out the channel, and we'll see you on the next one.